Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Monday, June 24th, 2024. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Media commentary columnist and American Enterprise Institute senior fellow Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
And Washington commentary columnist and the director of domestic policy studies at the aforementioned American Enterprise Institute, Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
I have a report from our friend Noah Pollack, a sometime commentary contributor and friend to us all here at the Commentary Podcast, who was present in Los Angeles yesterday morning when what can only be described as at least an attempted pogrom broke out in the most Jewish neighborhood in Los Angeles, Pico Robertson, where all of the Orthodox Jews can walk to shul and where people go to eat and where the Adas Torah synagogue is. And here's Noah's report. Yesterday, Adas Torah hosted a small expo for Israeli real estate agents to show off their new housing developments to American Jews considering buying property in Israel. It was about a dozen tables with stacks of pamphlets on them set up in the conference room of the synagogue. Despite efforts to keep it quiet, Hamas supporters found out about the event and organized what people are euphemistically calling a protest. I had no idea leaving the house that there would be 100 wannabe terrorists outside. I left with my kids, and my wife, who was out running errands, was going to meet us there. It was clear from a distance that something was up, since Pico, that's a street in Los Angeles, in front of the shul had been shut down by the police. I parked a couple of blocks behind the shul and walked over. It was a spectacle. The street in front of the shul was now full of parked police cruisers, and an LAPD helicopter was circling overhead. Dozens of cops stood tightly together in riot gear around the front of the shul. As I got closer, I noticed something incredible. Behind the phalanx of LAPD, on the sidewalk in front of the shul, were the Hamas supporters. I thought the riot police were there to make sure Jews could get into their shul, but that's not why they were there. They were there to ensure the Hamasniks could shut down the event unmolested, quite literally behind a protective wall of police officers. I walked up to the phalanx and politely asked if I could please enter the shul, and they told me not to come any closer and that I should leave. I asked, shouldn't you be making sure that this place stays open? And the reply was to tell me to leave. At this point, as I was staying there holding my young kids' hands, a nice woman came over and said there had been some incidents of pepper spray and I ought to get my kids out of there. I hadn't realized until that point that there was actual violence happening, so I left. It was only in talking to people on the outskirts that I learned the event was still on, and if you find the alleyway behind the shul and knocked on the right door, there was a security guard who would let you in. So we did end up attending, but courtesy of the LAPD, the Jews had to use the back entrance in an alley so that others could stomp around in front of the shul under the protection of the Los Angeles Police Department. Incidentally, my wife showed up to meet us there and also tried to go in the front door and was also told, you're not going in and you have to leave this area. Nobody appears to have seen the LAPD tell any street animals that they had to leave. It was apparently after we left that the violence escalated, as captured in videos that are all over Twitter. Why did it escalate? Because the police were under orders, it appears, to let the Hamas thugs run wild, and run wild they did. So yes, these videos are all over Twitter. I was watching them last night, frozen on a sidewalk, having parked my car in another very Jewish neighborhood on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and not believing my eyes at about 10:30 at night. These scenes, not only of Hamasniks wrestling a relatively elderly man and woman to the ground, but also scenes in other neighborhoods of people walking around with metal poles looking for people to beat up with their metal poles. In this case, on Alcott Boulevard. And later on, Mayor Karen Bass issued a statement saying hate has no place here, and we're horrified, and we're going to look into it. And Gavin Newsom issued a hate has no place here report. But others, and none of this is, it's hard to confirm any of this because the LA Times is such a terrible, terrible, terrible newspaper that even now, having had this major incident in West L.A. go down in the middle of the day on a Sunday afternoon, they do not appear to have had any reporters there and are relying on the city news service, which is a hyper local, independent reporting site for some of the details. The story that they have up now is the same story that they had up at 11 o'clock last night on the LA Times site. So in case you think the Washington Post is the only really terrible major metropolitan newspaper that doesn't know how to cover its local area, please be assured that the Los Angeles Times, the paper of the second largest city in the United States, is equally, if not more, garbagey and horrible and disgraceful. So I don't have any way to confirm a lot of the stuff that I saw. Talks about bear spray being used. Noah mentioned rumors of pepper spray. A couple of people were actually pulled from a car by the LAPD in Beverly Hills and arrested. That there is video of, but we just don't know what happened or what the circumstances are. And these reports that the LAPD had been informed by the synagogue that this event was going to take place, that they were getting rumblings that there would be an attempt to disrupt it, and that the LAPD's response to this was to create, as Noah says, if Noah's observations prove to be congruent with what the battle plan was for the LAPD, to protect the rioting zone rather than to ensure open access to a religious site in the United States for people gathering for an entirely peaceful purpose. Thoughts?
What can you say? I mean, this has become typical in America since October 7th. And there are other events. Man has died in Los Angeles when he was shoved to the ground. It's incredible. I also note that while this was happening in Los Angeles, I was reading about how Alvin Bragg declared to press charges on the individuals who overran and Hamilton Hall at Columbia and held two maintenance workers hostage for hours. So the two-tier system of justice seems also to treat Hamas sympathizers differently than people who want to attend an event at the local synagogue in Los Angeles. And that is incredible in itself.
And this comes, I think, a day after a Jewish family was attacked at a grade school ceremony in New York.
In Brooklyn, that's right. Yeah, I was just going to look that story up to tell the story that a family was set upon, a Jewish family was set upon by what appears to be a Hamas supporting family. Not quite clear how this exactly happened. A kid was allowed to wear a Free Palestine shirt or some kind of thing. And then maybe somebody said something like that's not appropriate, and then fists started flying, and two Jewish parents, mother and father, were beaten up by a crowd. Again, I'm having trouble finding the specific details.
And there was last week this was in Montreal, Jewish-owned business, shots fired at the business. You remember we've talked on the podcast about these lists that were created by pro-Palestinian types about where Jewish businesses are located in various large cities. I think there was one for Boston, one for New York. So this stuff, the targeting of just Jewish businesses is still going on. It's again something that I think Mainstream media outlets have had zero interest in exploring the motivations of the people who do it, the after effects. Law enforcement's always called. The Montreal business owner called called the Canadian police, said, "I think I'm being targeted because I'm Jewish." We'll see if anything comes of this, but this is the accumulation of these events continuing week after week after week. If it were, again, not to repeat myself a million times, any other group in American society that was being targeted in this violent and pernicious way, it would be front page news every single day.
This is very, very annoying that I can't find the story, so I'm going to try to change things up. And oh, here it is. Okay, let me just read part of this. New York City Jewish family pummeled at fifth grade commencement by attendees shouting "Free Palestine." A Jewish mom and her husband were attacked and beaten at a Brooklyn elementary school graduation by an Arabic-speaking family who taunted them with shouts of "Free Palestine," "Gaza is ours," and "Death to Israel." The mayhem erupted at PS 682 in Gravesend just after the school's fifth grade graduation, which was themed, ironically, "All You Need Is Love." The Jewish woman's husband was thrown to the ground by members of the other family. One man put him in a chokehold. There's a picture of the chokehold. Others grabbed his legs as they kicked and punched him. One woman repeatedly whacked him with the sharp heel of a black stiletto. The mom told police, "They targeted my family because we are Jewish," the mother said, whose 10-year-old twins witnessed the events. The Jewish mom, Lana, and her husband, Johan, a Dominican who was Catholic, recounted their experience to the New York Post in frustration because the NYPD did not classify the incident as a hate crime, and then it changed its mind and is now investigating it as a hate crime incident. Lana's mother was upset when one student marched across the stage wearing his graduate cap marked "Free Palestine" and waving a small Palestinian flag. The grandma walked out. A school administrator told another parent that the City Department of Education's legal staff had okayed the display as an expression of free speech. After the event concluded, Lana and Johan started to take pictures with their two kids in front of a PS 682 banner and balloons when relatives of the boy with the flag tried to push them out of the way. "We told them there was space for both families," Lana said. An older man turned to us and said, "Free Palestine," for no reason. My husband told him this was not the time or place for that, but the man cursed at him in Arabic and shouted, "Free Palestine, Gaza is ours, death to Israel." While Johan argued with the older man and told him to back off, another man just came out of nowhere, punched me in the head, and it was a scuffle, he said. From there, I don't remember because there was so much going on and so many people. On top of me, their 16-year-old son tried to help his dad, but he was punched in the face. So that's New York City on Friday, I believe. And the event that Noah Pollock wrote to me about was yesterday. Also over the weekend was a campaign rally for the apparently soon to be defeated in a gigantic landslide Jamaal Bowman, the congressman from Westchester and parts of the Bronx, who is pretty much being targeted for his anti-Israel, pro-Hamas, and anti-Semitic statements in a district that was historically very Jewish and represented for 35 years by Elliot Engel, who made the mistake of running infirm in 2020 and lost to Bowman. AOC and Bernie Sanders were at this event screaming and yelling about how the oligarchs are trying to control us and rule our policies. And Bowman, in a very interesting and very telling moment, started screaming, "On Tuesday, they're going to see who the F we are." And he didn't say F. He was in a sort of orange T-shirt because it was, of course, in the 90s this weekend. Pretty startling. I mean, AOC looked out of control. I mean, she was yelling and then yelling and then yelling faster, though I think one of the videos I saw might have been sped up a little bit. It might have made her sound a little more sort of demonic than she actually would have sounded had it been at normal speeds. But the point here is that we're 9 months after the war in Gaza broke out, and things are getting worse for Jews in their normal daily interactions on the streets of the neighborhoods and cities.
There's a frenzy quality to it all, especially if you watch the video of Bowman and AOC. they're whipped up and they're whipping the crowd up and they're saying horrific things. They're saying we're the many against the money, in the same breath that they're decrying AIPAC and Zionists and whatever else.
I do have some observations on this rally because as it seems like things are worse in the culture and in the society, politically, the pro-Israel community has done very well in these primaries. And if Jamaal Bowman, pray to God, loses tomorrow to George Latimer, that will be another success where the pro-Israel community comes out and is able to fight back this Hamas virus that is overtaking parts of the Democratic Party. And that's a real danger for Democrats, that the Hamas sympathizers become entrenched in the Democratic Party. A similar process happened to the British Labour Party under the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn about a decade ago, and it took a long time for Labour under new leadership, Keir Starmer, to get the party back to where it is likely to win in the election next week in the United Kingdom. So when I see the rally that happened with Bowman and AOC, it is just terrifying on one level. AOC, she really has two modes. There's the Instagram live reel mode where she's talking about recipes and video games and, what her Labradoodle did on the street the other day. But then there's the kind of like hysterical cheerleader mode too. And I've seen her kind of talk like that, give speeches like that for herself and for anti-Semitic causes. But she was definitely in hysterical cheerleader mode for Bowman. And that turns people off. Over the weekend, there were two stories that I think bear notice. One was in the Washington Post. This is a story. The headline reads, "In Maryland, Larry Hogan pursues Jewish voters as GOP census opening." This is in the Washington Post, and it's well reported, and it is stating what seems to me to be obvious, which is that Larry Hogan, who's the very popular former Republican governor, who's now the Republican nominee for an open Senate seat in Maryland, is really taking the pro-Israel message to voters and seems to be having some success. And then in CNN, too, there was a story, headline reads, "Warning signs for Biden's Jewish support as war in Gaza drags on and anti-Semitism rises." This was slightly less well reported than the Washington Post piece, but it, again, underscored the divisions in the Democratic Party and about how many Jewish voters are frankly fed up with the kid gloves approach to these Hamas sympathizers inside the Democratic Party. So things look terrible, yes, but politically, American voters are fighting back the best they can against this terrible disease of anti-Semitism.
Okay, as a Labradoodle owner, I do just have to correct you. She owns a French bulldog.
I'm sorry. I was trying to grasp which dog.
No, but it's adjacent. It's doodle adjacent.
Yeah. So her dog is gasping for air while yours gambles
Mine's
about.
Just adorable
Yes.
and cute. No, but I think this is a really important point because we've talked about before how Biden ran on Charlottesville the first time around, and he's since shifted in tone in the last few days although we haven't heard from him in a while, and we won't hear from him at all until Thursday at the debate, which is itself should be a sign to voters of just how unseriously this administration takes rising anti-Semitism and the violence against Jews in this country. He should be in front of a microphone right now denouncing this. He should. There's just no excuse for not doing that. But his tone now is about how the new message, I guess, is that after 2020, Trump snapped. Something inside him snapped, and now he's this rogue, potential dictator, and we should all be terrified of Trump. But I think when people look at someone, as Matt described, you look at AOC losing her mind on a stage and stomping, and everybody said she looked like that scene from The Office of Dwight Schrute, but in a wig, when he gives that speech where he's rather dictatorial in his tone and gesture. I think people think maybe the Democratic Party has lost its mind. And without a leader of that party stepping out in front of a microphone and saying, look, this is unacceptable. We do not tolerate this kind of hate, while similarly constantly reminding people of what happened in Charlottesville and how crazy Trump is. People aren't stupid. I think they will see the contradiction in tone of this campaign.
I should add that at the end of the CNN story, the reporter notes that the Biden campaign is putting a lot of its hopes for Jewish outreach on the shoulders of second gentleman Doug Emhoff. And when Doug Emhoff is your only chance to maintain good ties to the pro-Israel community and to the Jewish American voting bloc, you're in trouble.
I think that something very important is going on here. So that I would say, in reverse of Abe's famous admonition, it's better than that. It's terrible what's happening. But there is, I believe now, real evidence in a change in what I would call the American Jewish consciousness and consensus. You hear this from all over the place, that story that you mentioned in CNN. And there's a Twitter feed, a Nevada political consultant, young guy, named Elliot Malin, who is a Zionist activist, but has worked in politics in Nevada, is on the Nevada Holocaust, as chairman of the Nevada Holocaust Council, appointed by the government, and he has a long Twitter stream here that I am about to pull up. The reason I'm bringing this up is to say that one of the issues with the Jewish community over the last, let's say, 12 years, and I would say the hinge moment would have been at the Philadelphia Democratic Convention in 2012, when the idea that Jerusalem was the capital of Israel was shouted down, voted down from the floor of the convention. And ironically, the mayor of Los Angeles at the time, who was sitting in the chair, having heard the collective body of the floor of the convention in a voice vote say no, it did not want the platform to say that Jerusalem was the capital of Israel, said the ayes have it, and it went through. So 12 years ago, there was this moment of who's on your side? Democrats on your side or Republicans on your side? And then everything started to get garbled. Charlottesville garbled it. Tree of Life garbled it. Trump's seeming association with anti-Semites on the right and on the far right garbled it to some extent. But that there was real reason for people who identify as Jews, for whom I would say their Judaism is a significant part of their identity, not, a bit of flavoring in the soup of their identity, where they like bagels and they watched Fiddler on the Roof and they went to a Seder a couple of times, but otherwise, and may or may not have had a bar bat mitzvah of some sort, but that they live no Jewish life whatsoever. But still, you ask them in a survey, are you Jewish? They say they're Jewish. But that plays no role except in penumbras and emanations in how they vote or what they believe. And that this group of people then simply remained where it was, pretty much frozen, 70% in support of the Democratic Party nationally. Something is changing. And in Elliot Malin's Twitter feed, he explains that he has spent his days months around Jewish donors of all kinds in Nevada, where there's a very significant Senate race going on in Nevada between with Jackie Rosen, who is Harry Reid's appointed successor, and I can't remember who the Republican is, but Israel is playing
Sam Brown.
Sam Brown, thank you. Israel is playing some role. Jackie Rosen, actually, Jewish woman whose almost entire reason for being the nominee of the party seems to be that she ran the JCC in Las Vegas. Didn't seem to have a lot of other standing, but there we were. He says, look, he claims 50% of the Jewish donor base in the Democratic Party, the donor base of the Democratic Party is Jewish. I don't know if that number is accurate, but it is wildly disproportionate. And that he is seeing a real turn in the way Jewish donors talk to Democrats who come to them to raise money, that they are angry, that they are dismissive, that they are sneering as they talk to the people who come to raise money for them, and that at a fundraiser attended by First Gentleman Doug Emhoff and others, that there was interestingly Ben Stiller, the actor, was apparently at this fundraiser, and it was after this fundraiser that he felt driven to write a pretty weak sauce piece for Time magazine, but nonetheless one in which he said, "I can't stay silent. I don't like to be political, and they are how are people not denouncing Hamas, and what is all this going after Jews, and we need to love each other and not hate each other, and blah 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 blah." And we hear this anecdotally all over the place, or I hear it anecdotally all over the place, but not systematically. And then there is this question about the fundraising of the two campaigns. So yes, again, honesty, and I think something else in a minute, compels me to say that the money raised by Jewish donors or given by Jewish donors plays an outsized role in both parties. And Trump has achieved what appears to be parity with Biden in fundraising, and a lot of that is a massive increase in fundraising from high dollar donors, not the low dollar donors that he is often dominated with. And the question then is, are Jews, particularly affluent Jews, making this turn and saying to themselves, I cannot in good conscience, I cannot support Joe Biden, I cannot support Democrats. Look at how they have been acting since October 7th. I'm scared. If they have any relatives who are, as we now know, visibly Jewish being the term, if I have any relatives who are visibly Jewish, they are at risk and at threat where they live. And where was Doug Emhoff this weekend, right? Doug Emhoff was in Pittsburgh at a dedication of the new Tree of Life synagogue rebuilt after the monstrous, horrible shooting in 2018. And this was a moment of see love beats hate, and we're not going to let hate win. And it's really great that Tree of Life was rebuilt, and I'm not making fun of that. But having a positive moment of solidarity with the Jewish people on the same weekend that there's a semi-pogrom in L.A. and Jews are being beaten up in Brooklyn, and leading Democratic politicians are screaming about the Benjamins again, and how terrible it is that Jews are doing with the Benjamins. Something is happening. Things are stirring. It may be very specific to this election. We will see over the next couple of weeks whether the second anniversary of the Dobbs decision, which is today, creates another new set of consciousnesses among liberal Jews about how terrible Republicans are on abortion, and that undercuts some of this feeling. But the existential threat to Jews is real. The fact that Jews are feeling existentially threatened in the United States is real, and it makes sense that there would be this incredible blowback, that there would be real blowback.
Yeah, I mean, it also raises the question of why didn't Biden go to the reopening of the Tree of Life synagogue? I mean,
guess who didn't speak
he was at Camp
about
David.
L.A.?
Right. I mean, it's nice to have Doug there, but it does seem like the administration's attitude since October 7th was, okay, well, let's be nice to Jews, so we'll get the second gentleman out there. And everything, all the relations with this administration and the Jewish community in the United States is channeled through the vice president's husband. That's kind of because he's Jewish. It's kind of insulting, like Biden could take a little bit more of a role here. Instead, he was at the beach, and then he was in Camp David. I just also, we should point out, since we're doing I think a pretty good job of going through the headlines this morning. There was a terrorist attack in Kamchatka, the capital of Dagestan in Russia, where not long after October 7th, there was an attempted pogrom, a mob attacking a group of travelers that the mob believed to be Jews. In this case, that happened over the weekend. Terrorists targeted both a synagogue and an Orthodox church, and the attack seems to resemble the type of attack that occurred earlier this year in Moscow, when a group of ISIS terrorists attacked a music hall, killing over 100 people. So this anti-Semitism, this hatred of Jews, this Islamic radicalism has deadly consequences. And America has been very lucky that since October 7th, we haven't had a major terrorist attack or a major anti-Semitic attack like the Tree of Life shootings in 2018. But we may be coming close, because every few days, it seems lately, we're getting reports of more terrorists that were let in on the southern border, but then the FBI and Border Patrol realizes are threats to our lives and safety, and are then subsequently arrested. So it's a terrible brew here when you have all of these different vectors coming together at once.
John, I think the change among the Jews that you describe is very real, and I wouldn't even be surprised if it's more substantial than we realize, because the protesters, that's what we're going to keep calling them, they have proved beyond any reasonable doubt that this is not a policy issue, it's not a political issue, it's not even an Israel issue. They've demonstrated so clearly that this is just about raw, violent anti-Semitism, and then reinforced it and reinforced it and reinforced it. But one problem here is the coverage. If the New York Times, for example, covered what happened in L.A. yesterday, they didn't do so in a way that was prominent enough for me to find it, because I couldn't find it there. You have to be plugged in to either red media or Jewish media to sort of get the full scope of what's going on here. If you're not, you can think, well, it's not pretty out there, but it still looks like America. And when you dive deep into this stuff, it doesn't look like America, actually.
It's also given, I mean, we haven't talked much about, we've mentioned anti-Semitism on the right, and John, you're correct that Trump sort of just ignored it or sort of flirted with it throughout his presidency. But that's undergoing a shift too, right? You've seen, the Candace Owens, Alex Jones types being called out, being removed, the sort of fringier elements being purged. And I think in part because, watching this campus activism, conservatives don't like that. Republicans don't like seeing that kind of disorder, and it has sort of unified folks. Also, Trump has been either canny or just Trump, and not really engaging beyond saying, when he's interviewed and asked directly, what should Israel do post October 7th? He's like, well, that never would have happened on my watch, right? That's the line he trots out, but he doesn't really give a lot of specifics. I mean, he did criticize Netanyahu briefly recently, but he's kind of, it's freed him from having to actually get into any policy specifics, which, as we've discussed, he's kind of bad at doing anyway. But I've been watching with a lot of fascination what's happened on the right with anti-Semitism, because, it's changing, it's shifting in tone, it's shifting in terms of what people are willing to say about the more extremist elements. And to Matt's point, like politically, the people who have been very, very anti-Israel on the right aren't doing so well either. I mean, is AIPAC spending a lot of money against Thomas Massie and others? And we'll see how that plays out electorally. But that's also something worth watching, and how the sort of radicalism of the pro-Hamas protester types is shifting how the right deals with its own anti-Semitism problem.
I'm sorry, I have to correct myself once again on this show. I mangled the capital of Dagestan. I called it Kamchatkala, which sounds very nice, but it is in fact Makhachkala.
How dare you?
So I just wanted.
How dare you?
Well, as I predicted last week when I got something wrong,
I wasn't going to say
someone
anything.
did email.
You're going to get
I just
Dagestan
want to
hate mail.
make sure everyone knows. I recognize that the capital of Dagestan is Makhachkala, and the attack happened in Derbent, Dagestan.
Well, Kamchatka, you will be forgiven.
Right,
Kamchatka
but that's what
is
I
part
did.
of Siberia.
I know.
Part of Siberia. So you are,
Kamchatka
yes,
and Makhachkala. But now
yes.
I will be able to separate the two in my mind.
Yeah, it actually it all ironically sounds like Yiddish, right? Kamchatkala would be like, oh, cute little Kamchatka. What an adorable little Kamchatkala. So the thing that is also a potential breaking point, and that is maybe the issue of our time for American Jewry, is the Jewish community for 100 years. I think I've said this on here, but I'm been saying it increasingly in speeches and stuff, and so I can never remember where I say what, but the Jewish community had an approach to living in America pretty much since the beginning of the 20th century, which is, well, we're going to make a deal with you. Let us be, and we will be a credit to this country. We've come here. We are living under conditions that Jews have never ever lived under before in wondrous ways. We are living in a country that guarantees freedom of religion, that guarantees that has implicit guarantees of equality of opportunity. All we want is just to be let be, practice our faith. We'll try to make a go of it here. If we do well, we're going to contribute to the society. And the wealthier we get, the more we will contribute. We're going to build concert halls. We're going to pay for hospitals. We are going to contribute to civic institutions. We are going to contribute to every university that we attend. We're going to build buildings there. We are going to be civically minded, eleemosynary, generous, serious, and pay tribute back to the country that did so much for us. And all we ask is that you let us be. You don't treat us the way we've been treated in other countries historically for the last 2 millennia. And we will, we're going to fulfill our end of the bargain. This is not anything that anybody sat down, had a meeting and discussed. This, I think, pervaded the Jewish consciousness in the United States, that it was a blessing and it was a blessing to live in America, notwithstanding some efforts to put roadblocks in the way of Jews. Whatever those roadblocks were in America, they were nothing compared to the roadblocks everywhere else in the course of Jewish history. And so the deal was struck in their own heads and has been adhered to for 100 years. And Jews make up 2% of the population. They are, again, wildly disproportionate in terms of their charitable giving, wildly disproportionate in terms of their political giving, and are, next to Nigerians, the second most successful immigrant group or ethnic, homogeneously ethnic group in the United States in terms of annual income, and I think way outdistance almost everybody else in terms of wealth, like who has property and things like that, the non-liquid assets. And so this has been husbanded for 100 years, and the time for husbanding Jewish power is over. That Jews are under threat, and this is the time at which a powerful group, which has amassed its power and withheld itself from exercising it, will now have to exercise it. And it's going to have to exercise it as it's doing against Jamaal Bowman, as it will do in the summer against Cori Bush. And the question is, will it be doing so against Joe Biden in some fashion or other, in ways that we can't yet entirely tell? Some of that could be fundraising that goes to Trump. Some of it could be withholding fundraising. Some of it could be voting in key districts and in key places like Pennsylvania, where we have a very close Senate race and there are 400,000 Jews, and who knows what's going to happen. If this happens, if I am right that this threat is seen as a unique threat, not a momentary one, not a passing one, like an attack on a synagogue or something, which you can look at as a passing individual lunatic living somewhere in a basement, reading things about the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society supporting illegal immigrants, and then coming and shooting 11 Jews and killing 11 Jews at a synagogue. Something different is happening, and it will have to happen, and it should happen. And it's why it's one of the virtues of the United States that it is not only legal but moral for people to gather as a group, if they are a minority, to protect themselves. Nobody objects to this as a matter of general principle. If Black people want to come together and as a group say, even if they're right or wrong, say police are, being excessively brutal to us, and we're going to try to change the policy in our city and where we live to change those policies, incarceration policies, however you want to put it, you are within your rights to lobby on matters of concern to you. And this now goes beyond Israel, right? It goes beyond Israel. Israel is a canary in a coal mine and an example, but this is about the safety of Jews in America as Jews, and the effort that is being made to drive Jews underground, to make it so that Jewish events can't take place, to make it so that Jewish people cannot gather peacefully to go look at real estate brochures for apartments in Beit Shemesh. Like, this is a real thing, and it is, if I'm right about this, and this is really happening, it is an epical sea change for Jews in the diaspora to say, we're here, we're strong, we're powerful, and we are going to use our resources to protect ourselves and to defeat our enemies. And that is why the Bowman race tomorrow is so important. The various third-party campaign structures are going around neighborhoods in Westchester and other places. There is a Young Israel in New Rochelle. Young Israel is a network of modern Orthodox, or sometimes not even modern, synagogues in the United States. One presumes that the majority of the members of, say, the Young Israel of New Rochelle are probably Republicans, and it is very possible. But apparently, they had an enormous turnout. They did early voting, and 680 of 823 congregants voted in the Democratic primary. It may well be, therefore, that they had to switch their party allegiance at some point in the recent past in order to vote in the Democratic primary. And I think it's fair to say that vote is probably close to 100% for George Latimer, the Democratic Westchester County executive against Bowman. And that is what that when AOC and Bernie Sanders will start yelling about the oligarchs, these are the oligarchs they're talking about, which is the people who are helping to fund these third-party efforts to make sure that people vote early and gathering signatures and doing whatever they do to make this happen. And that is new. That is new for Jews. Like, that is not, Jews certainly do vote in disproportionate numbers, but they usually do so issue-based in different ways. Like, they're gonna go somewhere and give a lot of money to climate change, and they may now be giving money to Jews to protect Jews.
I have a public service announcement after the events this weekend. Stop giving us baloney about how anti-Zionism isn't anti-Semitic, because you cannot watch what happened in Los Angeles, and you cannot watch what Jamaal Bowman and AOC engaged in over the weekend and not recognize that as anti-Semitic political messaging. It's clearly anti-Semitic, and this shield that the Hamas sympathizers believe they possess, where they can say, no, we're just anti-Zionist. It's obvious. It's obvious that their anti-Zionism is just anti-Semitism.
Well, and that shield actually is most useful for moderate Democrats, moderate liberals who do not want to confront what is going on in their own party, on their own side of the aisle with regard to anti-Semitism.
And it's just incredible because it's gone from, well, criticizing Israel isn't anti-Semitic. Obviously, criticizing Israel, but this is not criticism of Israel. These people on the streets are saying
they're targeting elementary schools.
They say 1948. Right? It's the existence of the state that is animating these pro-Hamas types to go to the streets. And that is anti-Semitism, because there's one country in the world that these people believe has no right to exist. And it happens to be the country of the Jewish people.
Jamaal Bowman shouting, they're going to see who the F we are. Let's transpose this a little bit. Let's say that Matt Gaetz is running in Florida against a Jew, and the Jew is like targeting Matt or Marjorie Taylor Greene or something like that, targeting or not a Jew, but somebody who was targeting Marjorie Taylor Greene for being, because George Latimer is not Jewish, targeting Marjorie Taylor Greene for her behavior on Israel and the way things she says about Jewish space lasers and whatever. And then she says on Tuesday, they're going to find out who the F we are. I think it would be fair to say that MSNBC would spend 3 hours saying Marjorie Taylor Greene is threatening a pogrom if voting doesn't go their way. I don't know how to look at the way Jamaal Bowman was acting on that stage, if you have to go look at the clip. So he's in this T-shirt. He's walking around saying they're going to find out who the F we are. By the way, PhD, Jamaal Bowman, though we have now discovered that his PhD was, like so many people's this year, plagiarized. And then he takes a chair and he starts banging on the chair and he starts saying, "Cease fire now. Cease fire now." And then he lifts the chair up and is shaking the chair. "Cease fire now." What happened over the last 4 weeks between Israel and Hamas? 8 separate ceasefire proposals from Israel rejected by Hamas. Chanting ceasefire now should be, in rational terms, a phrase that would cause you to support Israel and turn on Hamas for rejecting the ceasefire. But of course, the phrase ceasefire now does not mean ceasefire. It means F Israel. And you're going to find out who the F we are when we take to the streets because you beat us.
I mean, he's playing the heel. He was playing the role of the heel in a wrestling match. I mean, it was really weird, but he's saying it's effective. Meanwhile, on the right, the Wall Street Journal just did a big profile of Matt Gaetz. obviously seen as one of the more radical members of the Republican Party in the House. And, it did sort of try to paint him as extreme. But, when you look at the quotes from the piece, he's like, I want to end the wars, shut the border, and reduce the spending. And he calls himself a fighter. Comparing that rhetoric to what we're seeing out of the mouths of the darlings of the left is it's clarifying.
And you know why they held the Bowman rally outdoors? So no one could pull the fire alarm. Wouldn't that have been great? Because so
snap.
hot. It was so hot. Why have it outdoors? It has to be the sole reason. Because otherwise they would have pulled the fire alarm and ended the rally.
There's so much more to talk about. Debate coming up on Thursday. Interesting emanations and penumbra out of Israel that the war in Rafah Israel is very close to feeling as though the war in Rafah has been won and that they have destroyed Hamas as an active political entity and need to turn to the north and the objections to the administration. But we're running out of time on this, so we will try to take those up tomorrow. Matt, you have, I think, today's recommendation.
I do. Thank you, John. A book came across my desk this past weekend that I'd like to recommend. We don't spend a lot of time on the podcast talking about the war in Ukraine, but it's still very much important and still going on, of course. I recommend everybody read a book called Battleground Ukraine, From Independence to the War with Russia by Adrian Karatnicki, a longtime foreign policy.
Karatnitsky. Pronounced Karatnitsky. But that's okay.
Has he been
it's spelled
Has he been to Makhachkala recently? Or I'm sorry.
Kamchatkala. Kamchatkala. Yes. Anyway.
Anyway, Karatnitsky, new book, History of Post-Soviet Ukraine. It's excellent. It gets into the political dynamics. It gets into the corruption. It gets into the ongoing attempt by Putin to reclaim Ukraine as part of a reconstituted Russian empire. It's very well written. And one of the major points he makes is, look, what we're seeing in real time is the creation of a national identity. It's been going on since, well, there's always been kind of a Ukrainian identity. It has been suppressed for centuries by Russians and throughout the 20th century by the Soviet Union, began to emerge once more after independence, after 1991. But it's really in the crucible of Putin's attempt to reconquer Ukraine that the Ukrainian spirit and the Ukrainian national identity has become formed. And it's important to note as well that new national identity wants to look west, wants to join the European Union, wants to join NATO, wants to become part of the American-led alliance structure that is meant to secure the world for liberty and self-determination. So it's both a very readable history, a factual history, and one that I think has important lessons for policymakers and for people who are thinking about foreign policy today.
Let me just add at the end, I want to give a shout out to the new Dan Senor Call Me Back podcast released early this morning because it's very important to listen to. It's called The Day After Document, and Dan talks to a professor named Netta Barak-Koren. I'm going to assume that Netta Barak-Koren is not a right-winger because she's a Hebrew University professor of law and teaching at Princeton. So I'm going to assume that if she's at Princeton, she's no settler. And she and three other academics, beginning in November of 2023, began work on the document that supposedly doesn't exist, which is the Day After document. That is a study looking at the historical parallels to the situation in which one country at war decides that it must obliterate the ideological foundations and the military foundations of an irredentist regime. So it treats Gaza as Hamas as a sovereign in the regime of Gaza, and says, what lessons can we draw from positive efforts to extirpate such dangerous regimes, meaning Germany and Japan, and less positive examples of efforts to eradicate such things that don't work out the way that people want, like Iraq and Afghanistan. And this document, which is 30 pages, is not public. Dan has read. They discuss what's in it, and it's real. It's there. There are plans. The plans are serious, and they are very complicated. And if you want to be well informed on this matter as this week progresses, and indications are that Israel is close to wrapping up its major military operations in Gaza, this is the podcast to listen to. So that's Call Me Back with Netta Barak Koren, with Dan Senor, and of course Adrian Karatnitsky's book that is not about Kamchatka,
Battleground Ukraine.
Battleground Ukraine. So we'll be back tomorrow for Abe, Christine, and Madam John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.